So what I want to do today is go through these texts so we all have a better understanding of what's in them, so we'll be able to follow and engage with the political and public discussions that are ongoing now and will be unfolding over the coming days, weeks, months, indeed even years, and also that we get a better understanding of what's at stake when we're talking about Brexit. Okay. So, just to set the scene, let's go back to the 29th of March 2017, and this was the formal launch of the Article 50 process. So this was the UK, a letter from the Prime Minister, formally notifying the European Union of its intention to withdraw from the European Union. So moving from an EU 28 member states to an EU of 27 member states. Now, the 29th of March saw the opening of a 2-year window within which the UK's orderly withdrawal from the European Union was to be negotiated. So that has been the focus of the negotiations since the 29th of March up until now. So the UK is due to leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March 2019. And according to withdrawal agreement, into a period of transition before the final landing zone, which is that final UK-EU relationship. Okay, so following the notification in March last year, the negotiations actually began in earnest in June 2017. And really they've been characterised by unprecedented unity amongst the EU 27 member states, a lot of soul-searching in the UK and contestation about that final landing zone, a very clear articulation of red lines and then a gradual kind of softening of those red lines over time. We've seen a number of high-drama crunch points, and some of these high-drama crunch points that actually never were, and a lot of boisterous posturing, which actually weeks, months later, very quietly and calmly, there have been a number of agreements that have been reached. So, the outcome of the negotiations, as I say, what I want to focus on today is these two texts, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, which is attached to this withdrawal agreement. Now, what's included in this withdrawal agreement are these three substantive issues, so citizens' rights, the financial settlement, and the border on the island of Ireland. And very early on in the negotiation process, it was agreed that there needs to be agreement on these three key things as part of an orderly withdrawal. Now, in addition to that, within the withdrawal agreement, there is a chunk on other separation issues that we'll address today, and also there's the inclusion of the provision for the transition period. And then finally, a political declaration that will accompany this withdrawal agreement. So, let's go through these things in turn. To begin with citizens' rights. Now, actually, this is an area where there's been very little movement since the agreement that was reached at the end of last year. Now, what has been agreed is that individuals and families who have made decisions, made life choices, assuming that the UK will continue as a member of the European Union, are to be afforded the same rights that they enjoy now. It's a reciprocal agreement, so the UK and the European Union offer reciprocal rights that are a floor and not a ceiling. And the real emphasis is on securing a clear pathway to permanent resident status for EU 27 nationals in the UK and UK nationals in the EU 27. So a simple process in terms of actually what is required, in terms of what the steps are, and also light in terms of administration. So the second substantive point was the financial settlement, and once again, this is where we've seen very little movement from, or no movement since what was agreed at the end of last year. So this is really the financial obligations that the UK has towards the European Union. And what was agreed last year and what's included in this draft withdrawal agreement is an agreement on the methodology for calculating how much money the UK will be paying, and also the process by which these payments will be made. So we're not going to be faced, the UK isn't going to be faced with a big Brexit bill that will be dozens of billions of euros, but instead the UK is going to pay, now that I will get the correct wording, not more or earlier than if it were a member state. So that money will continue to be transferred in the same way as if the UK were a member state up until the full payment has been made. So it's really those two first issues, citizens' rights and financial settlement, where there was very little movement since last year, where really there's been a huge amount of contestation and some movement has been with respect to the border on the island of Ireland. And what we see within the withdrawal agreement is actually a protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now, really, this is an area where, from the very beginning of the Brexit negotiations, there was agreement in principle between the UK and the European Union. So the principle that we wanted to secure the common travel area, the peace process, and also to ensure that soft border on the island of Ireland. Now, what the UK government agreed to at the end of last year, that was, as part of any agreement, they would ensure that there would be a soft border on the island of Ireland. So they essentially were committing to a backstop, the Northern Ireland backstop. That's what it's being referred to. So, essentially, this protocol on Northern Ireland will come into play if that future agreement between the UK and the European Union does not secure a soft border on the island of Ireland. So if the UK and the European Union, through those negotiations, are not able to secure a soft border, then this backstop, this protocol, will have legal force. It will come into play. Now, this is really a contentious part of the withdrawal agreement. There are some people say it's keeping the UK too close to the European Union, and there are other people who are saying that it's actually leading to the increased fragmentation of the UK. So it's challenged on many counts. So let's dig down a little bit and see what's in this protocol. So the first thing is this protocol provides for the creation of a single EU-UK customs territory. So within this customs territory, there will be no tariffs, no quotas, or no checks on rules of origin. And it also means that the UK will maintain the EU's external tariffs. So no striking international trade deals whilst the protocol is in operation. Also, what it does, it establishes a level playing field between the UK and the European Union. And so this is essentially to ensure that the UK isn't able to undercut the European Union whilst they're part of this customs territory. So it essentially can't be more competitive. So the UK will have to either ensure a dynamic alignment or non-regression with respect to state aid, competition, taxation, environmental standards and labour standards to make sure the UK can't be more competitive than the European Union whilst part of this single EU-UK customs territory. So that's for the UK as a whole. Now this is where we see some divergence between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. As part of this protocol, Northern Ireland will continue to apply the Union's customs code. And this will essentially mean that there will be no single market restrictions on goods that come from Northern Ireland. In addition to that, in order to ensure a soft border, Northern Ireland will have to remain aligned with certain single market rules. So Northern Ireland will be a rule taker with respect to certain legislation on goods, agricultural production, agricultural marketing, state aid, etc. And this is to avoid that hard border. Also included in the protocol is really a commitment in principle and practice to the common travel area and the Good Friday Agreement, an assertion that the single electricity market on the island of Ireland will be maintained, And North-South cooperation will continue along a range of different fronts, including environment, health, higher education, tourism, sport, broadcasting, so across a range of areas. Also, and finally, the point I will mention now is the European Commission has also put forward a proposal to continue peace and interreg programmes across the border. So these are European programmes that support working over the border. Now, we don't know if this proposal is going to be approved. It has to go to the Council and the Parliament. However, this is something as well that has been set in train. So those are those three substantive issues: citizens' rights, financial obligations, and the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. And then we move to the other 2 points that I want to mention today, and this is separation issues. Now, I want to very briefly go through these so you get a better sense of the other issues that are included as part of this withdrawal agreement. So, included as part of these separation issues is that, for example, goods placed on the market before the end of the transition period will be able to circulate freely. There is a commitment to maintaining the integrity of supply chains. Geographical indications will also be protected. So this is your Welsh lamb and your Parma ham, for example. Also, we have agreement with respect to police and judicial proceedings, civil and commercial matters, the use of data and information exchanged before the end of transition, Euratom, so relating to nuclear energy, state aid, and anti-fraud investigation. So to give you a sense of the breadth of issues that are included under this separation issues heading within the withdrawal agreement. And then finally, the transition period, so which is included within the withdrawal agreement, and this will see when the UK leaves the European Union at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March next year. It will enter a transition period that will run in the first instance up to the end of 2020. And during this transition period, the UK will continue to abide by the full EU acquis communautaire, which means all laws, policies, norms, values, everything from the European Union. The difference will be is the UK will not have representation within the political institutions within the European Union. So, no MEPs, no European Commissioner, no representatives in the Committee of the Regions or the European Economic Committee, also no representatives within the Council, so outside of those political making structures, but continues to be within the single market, continues to be within the customs union, and also, as part of that single market participation, freedom of movement will continue to apply. Now, what's notable is that the withdrawal agreement allows for one extension of this transition period up to the end of 2022, at which point the UK and the European Union will move on to their new relationship. And it's on a joint agreement between the UK and the European Union that extension period could be extended. So that's all for the withdrawal agreement, and now to the political declaration, which is a bit of a lighter text at 36 pages instead of the cool 585 pages of the withdrawal agreement. Now, the first thing to note with this political declaration is it is political and it is a declaration. So it is not a legal text and it is not binding in any way. This is at the very best, this is a statement of intent. So it provides us with an idea of the areas that the UK and the European Union will be considering as part of those future negotiations. However, nothing in here has been agreed. So there are big question marks still about that potential future relationship between the UK and the European Union. There is a commitment at the top of the text to establish or seek to establish an ambitious, broad, deep and flexible partnership, possibly via an association agreement, which is something the UK pushed very hard against at the beginning, but now it's something that's actually within this political declaration. There are two parts to this with respect to the potential cooperation. One is the area of the economy, so attention to goods where a high level of integration is foreseen, and also services where there's a lower level of integration foreseen, but also touching on issues, for example, fisheries, digital, transport, energy, migration. But once again, I have to insist that this is declaratory text and no more than that. And in addition to those economic considerations, also there's the security considerations, and that's the other second big chunky part of the political declaration. Now, what is also important to note here is that the negotiations as part of this future relationship will not begin until the UK has withdrawn from the European Union. So we won't know any more about this until, well, just after 11 p.m. on the 29th of March next year. Now, I shall be handing over to my colleagues who will be exploring the legal and political dynamics within the UK, in part with respect to this withdrawal agreement and political declaration. So just a few reflections with respect to the EU side. And from what I'm reading and speaking to various people, my sense is that from the EU side, they're feeling that this is as good as it's going to get. There is no desire at all to regroup and to amend, to reopen and amend either of these two texts. I think there's a certain level of exasperation with respect to the UK in terms of its, over the period of negotiations, insisting on trying to unsettle the unity of the EU27, in consistently underestimating the European Union's commitment to maintaining the integrity of the single market. And so really, as part of our thinking of what is going to happen in the coming weeks and months, I'd be very surprised to see any renegotiation of either of these two texts. So, in terms of the milestones, well, we've had the first milestone with respect to these two texts, which was the approval by the European Council on the 25th of November. So this is the heads of state of the EU27 member states approved these texts. The next milestone is the 11th of December, when there will be a meaningful vote in the House of Commons, which my colleagues are going to discuss. And then finally, both texts also need to be approved by the European Parliament, and that is due to take place in March by just a simple majority. And there's no expectation that the European Parliament will throw a spanner in the works at this stage. They've been very integrated within the negotiation process. And of course, the biggest milestone, lest we forget, is 11 p.m. on the 29th of March 2019, when the UK is no longer an EU member state. And now at this point, I will hand over to my colleagues.